There was a systemic program of torture under John Burge that spanned for 20 years, and the kind of torture was electric shock, baggings over the head, mock executions, sticking guns in people's mouths, beating them with rubber hoses and sticks, always racially motivated. Racial slurs were being used. Lots of times there was attack on the genital areas with electric shocks, with beatings, with kickings. It started out with Anthony Holmes, and it went up through 1983 when Darrell was tortured at a remote torture site on the south side of Chicago, and then it went all the way to 1991 when a 13-year-old victim was tortured with electric shock under Burge's command.
They drove me to a site that I call the torture area, where it's a big, huge pipe you drive through and come out on the other side. There's a river, and they went up this hill. And the railroad tracks was right there. They turned the car around, they parked there, they got me out, and they told me, they said, "Nigga, look around." And I looked around, and it was an isolated area. They told me nobody will hear or know anything about what has happened to you. And then that's when they started to ask me about the murder.
This is the tunnel that the Burge and his men, or actually John Byrne and Peter Dignan, brought Darrell in to torture him. They drove through this tunnel here. They took him through the tunnel, up this dirt road area, up near those railroad tracks. They took him out of the car, and then they tortured him with the mock execution with the shotgun and with electric shock.
And one of the first things they did was they tried to hang me up by the back of my arms. My arms were handcuffed behind me, and Sergeant Burns got on the bumper. Now what I remember about that day is that it was a fine mist rain, real fine, but it was cold outside. They tried to hold me on each side while Burns held the handcuffs from behind, and they would let me go. And that would make my arms come up behind me, but they wasn't successful in doing that. Burns almost slipped off the bumper. So then they went and they opened the trunk of the detective car, and Dignan, that's one of the detectives involved, got out a shotgun. And he told me, he said, "Nigga, look." And he showed me the shotgun shell. He said, "Now listen, nigga," and he turned around. And I thought he was putting the shell up in the shotgun because it sounded like that to me. Then he turned back around and said, "Nigga, you gonna tell us what we want to hear?" When I replied no, this is when he shoved the shotgun in my mouth. And when he shoved it in my mouth, he kept saying, "You gonna tell me what we want to hear? Gonna tell me what we want to hear?" And when I refused to do so, one of the other ones told him, "Pull the trigger, blow that nigga's head off." And they pulled the trigger. They did this on 3 separate occasions. And the third time they did it, it seemed like when I heard the trigger click that the back of my brains was being blown out. That's what my mind was telling me. And as a result from that, I could feel my hair standing up on my head. At that time, I had a lot of hair, you know, not short like this here. And I could actually feel it sticking up. After that wasn't successful, they took me around to the passenger side, the back seat, on the passenger side of the car, and it was Burns that took an automatic and put it to my head and told me don't move. And they redid the handcuffs from behind me in front of me. And then at that point they made me sit down in the back seat of the car. They had pulled my pants and my shorts down, and it was one of them that's dead now, Grunhardge, had went around to the other side of the back door, opened the door, and he came in, and they made me sit down, and my hands was up in the air, and he grabbed them. After I sit down, he grabbed them, and so they pulled me back, made me lay down, and he had to handcuff my hands so I couldn't rise back up. And it was Sergeant Burns that first used the electric caliper on me, and at that time, he stuck it to my testicles, and I remember trying to kick him, and in the process of trying to kick him, they ended up, Dignan was trying to step on one of my feet. Burns was trying to step on the other one, and they kept hitting me with the cattle prod, telling me that they knew what had happened and they wanted me to confirm it, and they was asking me questions about it, and I refused to answer, and they kept hitting me with that cattle prod. I don't think we was there very long, but I know that to me it seemed like a long time. They ended up me telling them that, okay, I'll tell you anything you want to hear, anything, to get them to stop doing that. And then I got mad. I got mad because I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't stop them. I couldn't hurt them because they had the advantage on me.
Darrell Cannon said he was tortured with was a cattle prod, similar to this, in the sense that there are prongs that come out of it, and these like this, but it wasn't as long as this particular cattle prod. But this is used, of course, on farms and that kind of thing. And Darrell Cannon said that when they brought him to the remote torture site on the far south side of Chicago, that after they did a mock execution of him, and they then brought him into the car and pulled his pants down and shocked him on his genitals, and finally, after the mock executions and the electrocution or electric shocks by this kind of device, he said that he would give a confession.
When we went to the auto pond, this is when I was shocked again in my mouth, because by then I was mad and was saying, I'm not telling you nothing. And I got shocked in my, they put the cattle prod in my mouth that time, on my mouth, on my lips, and shocked me again. So eventually we ended up at the station. I think that was sometime after 3 or something like that. It had to be somewhere around there, 'cause I remember seeing children coming from school. And I eventually ended up seeing a state's attorney and signing a confession implicating myself in a crime that I had nothing to do with. And they locked me up downstairs in a basement that night. And the next morning I went to court. I wasn't a human being to them. I was just simply another subject of theirs. They had did this to many others, but to them it was fun and games. You know, I was just, quote, a nigger to them. That's it. They kept using that word like that was my name. You know, so no ma'am. They had no respect for me being a human being. I never expected, quote, police officers to do anything that barbaric. You know, that was my first time, and it wasn't until later on that I understood what they meant when they said that I was in for the hardest day of my life. You know, I understood that the next morning, you know, when I went to court and I replayed what had been done to me the day before, and they was right. And how did I feel? Anger, frustration, embarrassment, and all of those things still exist today. You know, it hasn't changed. It's as if this was done to me yesterday, and those emotions I still feel. You know, how much more longer after, I don't know. It's been 24 years, and I've never I have never I've never been able to get over it, and I don't know if I will. I just don't know. I've lost too much. You know, my parents, my brother, my nephew, adopted son. So, I don't know. But I'll keep on going, and I'll continue to talk about it regardless to how it makes me feel. You don't continue to quote unquote call me niggers throughout the day unless you are a racist. You know, and the way that they said it so downright nasty. You know, so there's no doubt in my mind that in my case racism played a huge role in what happened to me, because they enjoyed this. You know, this wasn't something that was sickening to them. None of them had looks on their faces like, you know, maybe we shouldn't do this much. Nuh-uh. They enjoyed, they laughed, they smiled, you know, and that is why my anger has been so high, because I continuously see how they smile. I continuously see how all three enjoyed this here. You know, if I had been white, I doubt very seriously if I'd have been treated that badly. You know, but because of the fact that I'm Afro-American, you know, who's going to believe me, you know, in court? Nobody.
Last in the courtroom, the judge, I explained it to the judge what had happened. I testified against Burge, and I told him what he did to me. The jury believed me. They found Burge guilty, which is a good thing. But the sad part was I had to live it all over again, as I'm doing now, as I do every night, every day.
I mean, here again, you know, you can describe it, but until you actually live it and been through it, you know, I used to try and imagine how black people felt in Mississippi and Alabama back in the days when the Klan used to terrorize them. And I really couldn't get a good feel for what they must have felt. But November the 2nd, 1983, allowed me to get a very good feeling.
Is torture ever right? Is torture ever something that should be countenanced in a society such as ours, under a constitution, under human rights principles? And of course the answer to that is no. Torture is never right. Torture should never be countenanced. It's always a human rights violation. So until the city of Chicago deals with this issue, and the changing of the guard deals with this issue, we'll never be able to cleanse the conscience of the city of Chicago about these horrific crimes and this horrific scandal.